Welcome to Volume 11 RockTalk Podcast, brought to you by Volume 11 Music. Your hosts, Rich Hoffa, Rick Lawhorn, and Mark Dunn. RockTalk, Volume 11 Music.
Hey, how's it going? This is Rock Talk at Volume 11 Music in Fredericksburg, Virginia. My name is Rich.
Rick Lawhorn.
Mark Dunn.
And today we got a big announcement. This episode is brought to you by Volume 11 Music Coffee. And this is heavy metal dark roast.
Yeah.
Excellent coffee. Stop by and get you some.
It works.
It
works.
picked Mark up. If you've seen the
Yeah,
video we
that was
did,
great.
I haven't been to sleep since
he
then.
was dragging a little bit and drank some Volume 11 coffee and started ripping like crazy.
Yeah,
Like
shredding,
this,
man, off
yeah.
this coffee. This
Couldn't play
coffee.
guitar that day. my optometrist is worried that I don't blink.
He's been up for 5 days, so it's got some.
Wouldn't
kick
be the
to it.
first time.
Yeah, 511 cuff.
That's right. That's right. So this week we just debated about a topic right before the episode. You know, we usually just get here, decide what we're going to do, and we go with it. But we're going to talk since the Led Zeppelin, they've got the documentary.
There's a documentary,
out.
yeah.
This week's episode is number 29.
29.
And we're going to talk about Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
And so, Rick, since you're all things
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin,
All right.
we'll let you you start it out.
Well, like we talked a little bit before we started filming, so great question right off the bat. Why is Led Zeppelin important? There's lots of rock bands, obviously. There were bands in front of Led Zeppelin, bands after. But if a Martian came down from Mars and said, okay, Earthlings, I want to learn about rock music, a good starting point for more guitar-driven music, in my opinion, would definitely be Led Zeppelin. So let's go back to 1968. Jimmy Page is in a band called the Yardbirds. Some other famous British guitar players were in that band, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton. Long story short, that band is coming to an end. He was going to form what was called the New Yardbirds, but he had to figure out who to get in the band. So long story short, he ends up getting John Paul Jones, John Bonham, the drummer, and he finds this amazing young singer. He's only 20 years old at the time, Robert Plant, with this unbelievably high, powerful, strong voice. So at that point, that became what is known as Led Zeppelin. They got a record deal with Atlantic Records, and then basically by 1969, I believe it was January 69, they released their very first album, Led Zeppelin, and then they had Led Zeppelin 2 that came out that fall. So you got two albums right off the bat in the same year, very blues-based. So there was a very heavy blues influence.
Probably recorded at the same time, too. I mean, continuously.
Right.
Yeah, and they just kept cranking out the songs, get a lot of material. And but even though that they were using the blues as a format, they still had a sound that was, quite frankly, unlike anything before. The sound of Robert Plant's voice, Jimmy Page's riffage, all those cool pentatonic blues rock licks. Now, he did cop from a lot of blues players, and he liked Otis Rush, B.B. King, wonderful blues influences to have, of course. But the sound of those songs and the way they put it together, it was a little bit of a different angle than anybody else in rock or even blues music, just as far as the sound of those four
Was Hard
members.
Record the first kind of example where there was a straight ahead,
Yeah,
just a guitar
solo in the middle, unaccompanied. Nobody else is playing. The whole band stops,
Yeah.
and then Jimmy Page rips for about a minute into that Heartbreaker solo off of the Led Zeppelin 2 album. So very cutting edge for its time,
Yeah.
and it obviously paved the way for so many of the bands that came out in the 70s. We could probably go on all day long talking about all the wonderful guitar players that came out in the 70s and 80s that were influenced by Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So just to get the ball rolling, I mean, I would definitely start with that, and if y'all would like to have any comments there, and we're in the very early era of Zeppelin at the moment. Just talking about them.
I think that you could take an analogy or kind of a parallel track between Zeppelin and the Beatles. Now, I'm not saying that they're the same,
Right.
but what I'm saying here is if you listen to the Beatles' first couple of records, it's very pop. Still blues-based.
Right.
But very, very pop. I mean, they wrote some amazing songs, and they also covered Black American artists as well that were, playing blues.
Chuck
Golly
Berry
Miss Molly and
Rock and
Roll
Roll.
Over Beethoven.
Yeah, Roll Over Beethoven.
Long Tall Sally from Little Richard and stuff
Right.
like that. But you get into their later albums, like post Rubber Soul, and they started to really not sound anything
Thing like that is early.
and the same thing happened
yeah,
with
was
Led
Zeppelin,
Zeppelin because
absolutely.
those first two records, arguably the third one as well, were kind of straight ahead blues albums, except for some cool little vignettes of Black Mountainside, acoustic thing. But I mean, like the Lemon Song,
a lot of
or
blues.
Bring It On Home. I mean, those are straight blues tunes.
Right.
And then when you get further into like Houses of the Holy, that's a completely different.
They
band.
totally got away from blues by
Yeah.
the time they got to that
And
record.
got orchestral.
Yeah.
And so when you think about how they developed, it wasn't. I mean, there's so many facets of Led Zeppelin, and if you were Robert Plant, you would say there's so many facets of the Led Zeppelin. That each kind of thing was influential again. So when you heard, of course, Stairway. That was just like this epic ballad that is completely a journey that starts acoustic with orchestral, background, and then comes into big drums, and then this climactic, what Jimmy Page calls the fanfare. So and then all of a sudden at the very end it just comes back all to Robert Plant's voice. And so you think about the epic songwriting that was nowhere near like that on the first two records.
Well, it even made it on the Forbidden Guitar list.
Well, that and then you listen to something like Achilles' Last Stand, where we were just talking about
I love that song.
And I was listening to it the other day. I'm like, that's where the Barracuda drum.
Barracuda, right? It's very, very similar.
So you can kind of draw.
They influenced a lot of bands that came out in the '70s,
and that's a 9-minute song.
Yes,
Yeah.
And it's not just some wankery. It's
well
it's
written.
an arranged 9-minute song.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Well, even to jump onto what you were talking about, and I was thinking about it this morning when Rick brought this up, but just the differences in the songs, and when looking at it from the drumming aspect of it, I mean, really, back then, I mean, drummers.
Can you imagine how good they would be if they had a good drummer?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, with John Bonham, I mean, a lot of bands were. The beats and stuff can be really close to the same in a lot of different songs.
Yeah.
And with Led Zeppelin and John Bonham, I mean, things were, getting so different per song. I mean, he was using so many different things, depending on the song was. It was really for drumming, it was seriously cutting edge.
Oh, for sure. And it still is.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting as guitar players or non-drummers, if you will. Want to know what the count is at the front of rock and roll, because we've always counted as one.
I always
had the stutter step to hit the downbeat when the band.
Oh man, why do I sound so out of time?
It's in 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's like, you gotta look at like every aspect of it. And I think when you think about, if you broke down each musician, each one is incredible unto themselves.
Yes.
But I think if you were going to say who did the heavy lifting, it would be John Paul Jones.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think he actually wrote the riff to Black Dog.
He did.
Oh, wow.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And here's a cool little factoid. If you listen closely to that song, it's a call and answer format.
Yeah.
Hey, mama said the way you move gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. Da 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 da. They're not counting.
Yeah.
No.
It's free time, and if you listen
time.
very closely, you can hear Bonham click his sticks together on the way to the snare. And that was their timing.
That feel that they just had to know.
Yeah.
That's when you jump in on that
They're all
riff.
standing around looking at each other, and he's probably making faces at him, and they come da-da-da-da-da-da. So listen very closely. You can hear that click, and thank you for letting me ruin the way you listen to that song.
Yeah, right. We deconstructing the riffs
Exactly.
here.
Exactly.
It's fun to hear it though. Now that's the human side of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So as far as their stuff is concerned, they had, Bonham died in what, 80?
80.
Mm-hmm.
Was Coda after that?
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how they got that released fairly quickly. So sadly, we lost John Bonham, in 1980, and then Atlantic Records. Well, I guess Jimmy Page said, "We're done. They pretty much ended the band. They didn't feel that they could really adequately replace John Bonham." He also, I've read a million things about Zeppelin over the years. The fact that he didn't want to go down the same road The Who went down, where Keith Moon died, and then they get a replacement drummer on the next album. The album just kind of bombed. He was afraid that was going to maybe happen if they continued. So he's like, let's just quit this thing. And Atlantic capitalized. They said, nope, we're going to put out at least one album, which was material that had not been released, and that was the Coda record.
So the Coda stuff, were those
leftover tracks
from
that hadn't
all
been
sorts of records.
Well, records like, for example,
They weren't just working on those tunes right then.
No,
before
not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. They were just
Those
kind of
were leftovers.
leftovers that just didn't make it to another album. Some were from the early 70s, mid 70s. They could have been on Physical Graffiti or Zeppelin 3, and they just had enough to be able to get that last official album out as Led Zeppelin. And then,
Coda's often misunderstood. And, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs is on that album.
yeah.
But it seems like they're not necessarily afterthought songs, but they're kind of, where would this go
Yeah.
kind of song.
Well, that's
Yeah.
why they
You
ended
know what I
up in
Yeah.
the
But thankfully, they didn't get rid of them.
They didn't get rid of it. They still had
Right,
enough to
right.
put out that extra album on there.
But that leads, makes you wonder how many songs are actually written and then end up on the album. Like if they've got X amount of songs that go on the album, how many were actually written and then we picked from these and these end up.
We
on
got
the,
12, but only 9 are going to make the album.
Right.
Well, they
You know?
probably laid them all down, too, because you got to remember.
Probably, sure.
For at least the first 2 albums were on 4-track. So
Right.
they're just like, go play.
Yeah.
Lay them all down.
Yeah.
And then, they probably did some bounces for the ones they were going to keep.
Yeah.
I have another question, though. Maybe Wikipedia knows the answer to it. When they came out with because they were the
Wikipedia.
first one to come out
We'll have
with.
to get you a T-shirt, right?
Yeah, there we go. Wikipedia. Yeah.
They came out with the box set.
Yes.
They were like the first one to do that, weren't they?
They-
And they also, didn't they have songs that were not released?
Yes.
Like Traveling Riverside Blues?
Yes.
What else?
Traveler, that was the one I remember. That's an old Robert Johnson blues song, but
Right.
they recorded that. That was going to originally be on Led Zeppelin 3. Great version. I love that version.
Oh,
They just didn't put it
wonderful.
on there, but it did make the box set. I think they might have had some like live versions of some things or sound check. Was it Since I've Been Loving You? I think they had a version of it that was not on the actual Led Zeppelin 3 album that made it as like an extra type of cut, like a sound check. I Can't Quit You Baby. That was one of them. I remember that one. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's been like 30 years here. And they were one of the first rock bands to really do the box set, the big box set.
Well, and
you know?
the thing about it is that there was a remaster there because when a record's remastered, what people don't get is like they think it's a money grab. Well, it sort of is, but when they came out with CDs, that medium was very thin sounding compared to your tape and your album at home. So remastering is changing how the EQ is set for that. So that was that.
Yes.
And then the other songs that hadn't been released yet, and plus they had the cool crop circle cover.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I have that whole box set at home. I'm gonna have to dig that thing out and listen to it because I've got all of that, all their material in that box set.
Yeah.
Should we do? Have you guys seen the movie yet?
I haven't. Seen
I have not. Some of my
I'm gonna
students
try to get
have,
to it this
and everybody
weekend.
says it's awesome.
Yeah.
So I do want to see it. I'm a big Zeppelin fan, and
Yeah.
it's definitely something. But I've heard nothing but really good things about it, and I guess just becoming Led Zeppelin kind of thing. I believe it's more about the early part of the band, not so much
Yeah.
the later years. Because, like you said, Mark, they did change the sound. And you mentioned Houses of the Holy, but also Physical Graffiti. Also,
yeah,
it wasn't really any real true blues on Physical Graffiti. You've got songs like Kashmir,
Right.
where it always has like a Middle Eastern kind of a flair to it.
yeah,
I
epic
mean,
tune.
epic, yeah.
Epic tune.
And of course, that was back in 1975, huge album for Zeppelin. And,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not like Zeppelin 2 or even that first album where you do have a lot of heavy blues riffage going on.
Well, also, one of the cool things about them, and we're kids when they came out.
Yeah,
right? But
absolutely,
learning more and more about them, like the instrumental experimentation that they would do, and some of the ironic things that not a whole lot of people are hip to. But that what sounds like a symphony on the Rain song is a keyboard called a mellotron.
Mellotron.
That's basically you mashing piano keys that play a corresponding tape. It's a pretty cool thing. The same thing they used on Strawberry Fields Forever the Fields. And then like in the evening, you had this thing that's literally called the Gizmotron.
Gizmotron, yes.
That is
I remember
just
that, yeah.
scraping these cylinders that just these little wheels that scrape the string to give you that kind of Middle Eastern kind of hurdy-gurdy droning sound.
It was like a sitar or something. I mean, yeah.
And that kind of thing is they were kind of on the cutting edge of just getting different sounds and doing different things. So.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to add, going back to the first album, everybody that I grew up with thought, wow, we see all these pictures of Jimmy Page playing this really cool Sunburst Gibson Les Paul.
Yep.
He didn't use a Les Paul on that first record. That's all Fender Telecaster as far as the electric guitar.
All the way through the fourth record.
Yeah, correct. The fourth album, the Stairway solo is a Telecaster. Believe it or not, is a Telecaster.
Communication Breakdown is a Telecaster.
Telly in the bridge pickup.
And so is Heartbreaker because it's been in the string behind.
Yeah, behind the nut there.
And
on
it's
the
what is it, like a 10-watt or 15-watt little Gibson Pro amp?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So the kings of heavy metal, which is an ironic statement, we think as well. I mean, I just think that they were a great blues rock and roll band. There were heavier bands than them, but they were given that name.
That title, they hated it too. They always like, we're not heavy metal.
Tell me the Rain song is a heavy metal song?
No,
It's
beautiful
absurd.
song, beautiful.
So, he didn't use the Marshalls in the studio, and he didn't use the Les Paul. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Les Paul, that's the famous one, was given to him by Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh,
Yeah.
yep. Back when they were all just kind of
good to him
starting out.
so
Yeah, life's been good. I always like the story too. If y'all knew this, but Ian Anderson.
Mark one-liner done.
Yeah,
We got Wikipedia and Mark one-liner.
there we go.
Done.
We got our cool nicknames.
Yeah, these days it's down to one line. Or some coffee.
Yeah, he doesn't know, but I call him Mark on 5 minutes late done.
There you go.
Oh wow!
If I'm on time, I'm 5 late.
Oh man! But Ian Anderson, threw some shade at him because he was like, "Well, I'll do my Ian Anderson impersonation. Brilliant musicianship, brilliant. Jimmy Page is absolutely clever and brilliant. John Bonham, amazing drummer. John Paul Jones, amazing. And that Robert Plant chap, just horrible rubbish for lyrics, horrible." I could hear Ian say, and as he said that, it's true, about 1970. So Robert Plant was so, offended, if you will, that he kind of quit using the more bluesy cliches in his lyric writing. And by the time they got to that fourth album, Led Zeppelin 4, there was no trace of really, well, I guess Levy Brace got some, but that the other two, Stairway to Heaven, a lot of those songs.
Those were
very,
Tolkien,
yeah.
But he used Tolkien on Ramble On.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting.
But really, Plant was really offended, really upset
Nice
by
job on
Ian
the
Anderson.
imitation
I mean,
there, by the
seriously.
way. That was a good
I had my Ian Anderson. Let's drink some British ale and have a little bit of Jethro Tull in the house.
I mean, when you listen to Kashmir, he's literally talking about that province. Mm-hmm. So some of the lyrics are cool. I mean, they kind of held a little bit of extra mysticism about the band, I think, even though I was too young to really remember. Mm-hmm. But if you watch The Song Remains the Same, that's appealing to a certain type of crowd that's doing a certain type of thing while they're watching it.
Right,
That's the best way to say it. But it still was like, they had a mystique about them.
Yeah.
That like when the firm formed, and they were coming to Norfolk Scope, they actually canceled that show, but there was not quite a Grateful Dead show up for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. People follow the Dead.
Yeah.
But there was people that were avid, spirit-based Led Zeppelin fanatics that were following Jimmy Page around the country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt that way about, and I agree 100%, Mark, Led Zeppelin and also Pink Floyd. You didn't even see their pictures pretty much on a lot of those albums, like Dark Side of the Moon. Right. And there was that mystique about those bands, and maybe that was...
Which one's the pig?
Yeah, which one? Who is Pink, by the way? So both those, famous British bands had that element.
I think, did Jimmy Page buy Aleister Crowley's castle?
He did. That is correct.
So I think that might have fed into some of that little, play on
mystique.
mysticism.
Yeah.
But... back then there wasn't MTV or anything.
No.
The Song Remains the Same was the Late Show at the Narrow and Get for probably.
Yeah, we go to the movie
straight
theater all the
years.
time in high school and watch The Song Remains the Same and The Wall by Pink Floyd. Those two movies were rock and roll movies that you could see at the theater.
And it kind of lays bare how not great they necessarily were live, but at the same time, it makes you understand how actually great they still were because they were trying to communicate the music that they had put on that record live. And some of it's impossible to do.
Right, right. I mean, Page was so clever at the overdubs that he was doing in the studio. And
genius.
I agree. I mean, total genius. And then, what do we do now live in concert? Because it's not like we got everything on tape like they do nowadays. I mean, they had to try to pull it off live. And, it was you got a guitar, a bass, a drummer, and a...
You know what else is interesting? The Song Remains the Same came out before Stairway to Heaven came out as a record, and they were touring and playing that
Yeah,
song.
I remember hearing that
before
too.
anybody ever knew.
Yeah,
about
knew it, yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So I mean that takes so like. Can you imagine just being in a band and you write an 8-minute or 9-minute song?
Epic,
It's like,
yeah.
y'all haven't heard this yet, but don't go to the bathroom on this.
Yeah,
one.
right.
This is gonna be big.
I think, seriously, I think I read that they were doing that in 70, like in late, they were doing Stairway in the fall of 70. So it was a year later before it really hit that Zeppelin 4 album in November of 71.
Was that when that came out?
Yeah, release date was, I think it was like November 5th, 1971. I remember just seeing that back this past November when the Rock and Roll Chronicles, on
I
this
have an
date.
original print of that.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law
Yep.
has her initials on it from when she had it. She gave it to me. So
Because I bought that album as a kid in '81, about the 10-year anniversary, just by coincidence, and of course I've worn that thing out over the years, definitely.
what's your favorite song on that album?
Oh man, I so many good ones. But I go back to probably Black Dog. I just thought it was such a great riff, like we were talking about earlier, and the kind of rhythmic confusion on it just left me baffled there in the early days, trying to figure out how to count that stuff in as a musician.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing. That's another thing you didn't know.
No,
You didn't know that they were not there. You didn't know it was free time. I'm trying to find the
Yeah,
downbeat.
where's the one? Where's the one? I don't know where it's
Where's
at.
it at?
So that, and of course, Stairway to Heaven. I mean, every kid at school, I play Stairway to Heaven, and all the jokes about the forbidden
I
song.
think my
and
favorite
stuff.
song on that is the Battle of Evermore.
Ballad Evermore is a great one. Yeah.
Because again, it's a departure.
It is. They had that folky, Celtic-y thing
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah,
as well as the heavy side.
Or
of what
going
they
to
did.
California.
Going to California.
Killer song.
Yeah.
But and I think that a lot of people kind of hone in on that. But I think pound for pound, song for song, I like Houses of the Holy better than that.
Wow. But I love House of the Holy, so
Yeah.
no disrespect
It's
to
kind
that
of like
record.
arguing over Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah, it's just so brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, you can take any of those. You're not wrong. And this is all subjective. There's
But
no right or wrong.
the Rain
answer.
song being my favorite.
It's one of my
Zeppelin
favorites too,
song.
yeah.
But by far, like, So yeah, I don't know. Are we gonna do a list?
I think that's the next episode, if I'm not
we should
mistaken.
do a list.
We're gonna do that on the next episode. So
We're gonna slug it out on the list.
Slug it out with Led
So
Zeppelin.
I think this wraps it up for this week's episode of Rock Talk. And where are you guys playing this weekend?
I am at the Bearded Monkey in Stafford with my band Cactus Jack, doing a mixture of southern rock and roll, classic rock and roll, some country, some newer country, older country, good time music. So Bearded Monkey, I think we start at 8:30 Saturday, March 8th.
Friday, you can catch me solo acoustic at Log Home Brewing, right down the street, 208.
Cool.
6 to 9, so it's an early one. Then Saturday, I'm in Clifton at a great little place called the Main Street Pub. Killer little Irish place. Amazing food, amazing people. 8:30. That's always a lot of fun.
Gotcha.
And you?
And I won't be doing anything. As
He'll
usual.
be drinking.
I'm
gonna be
Get
drinking
wired on this
11
coffee.
coffee.
is what
Heavy
he's
metal
gonna be
dark
doing.
roast.
Turn
Heavy
it up to
metal.
11.
Heavy
Turn it
metal
up to
dark
11.
roast.
Yeah, baby. I
That's
love it.
right. I will be doing none of that.
Nothing.
I'll be
Working on putting pickups into a guitar or
right.
something, right?
That's it. But I was practicing this weekend, working
Yeah.
on my chops,
Cool.
trying to get my stamina back up to get out there and start gigging.
Yeah, man. Start
Playing
doing
some
a-
rock and roll.
rock and roll.
That's right. All right, so this does it for this week's episode of Rock Talk. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it. And if you want to, suggest an upcoming episode, please leave it in the comments. We'll try to get to it. But have a good one.
This has been an episode of Volume 11 Rock Talk Podcast, brought to you by Volume 11 Music.